welcome to another episode of Divorce Happy Hour Live. My name is John Nachlinger. I am one of the co-owners of New Jersey Divorce Solutions, Private Nachlinger, a divorce and family law firm located in central New Jersey. Hope everyone's having a great day. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about child support. So child support is one of those topics that a lot of people get really heated about. And people get heated about it because either you think it's too much to pay or it's not enough to receive. Children are expensive. Let's not beat around the bush. Children are very expensive. Child support is a formula. So it's based on what some economists sometime thought that it costs to raise a child, depending on how much money you make. So because it's a formula, many people are upset by what number comes out at the end. And obviously the number that comes out at the end is based upon a variety of factors, including your incomes, taxes, your health insurance costs, the amount of time the child spends at each person's house. So those are the things that people tend to fight about because the number at the end is typically something we don't fight about because it is a formula. So today what I want to talk to you about is what is included in child support and what is not included in child support, because there's a big misconception about those topics. But it's actually pretty clear cut for the most part what is and is not included in child support. Now, before I start discussing that, I just want to make it very clear to all of you who are listening or watching that whenever you enter into an agreement, a divorce agreement, just an agreement with the person that you have children with about child support, if you're not more specific about what it's supposed to cover and what it's not supposed to cover and what expenses you're going to be splitting, then you're at the mercy of what the law says, which is what I'm going to discuss today. So if you don't want a judge to take the law and apply it to your case, you need to make sure that your agreement specifically says what your intention is about what child support is supposed to cover or what it's not supposed to cover. And whatever it's not supposed to cover, you need to be clear on how those expenses are going to be divided. Are they going to be divided proportionate to your incomes? Are they going to be divided equally? Is one parent going to pay for certain expenses? Those are things that if you don't agree to them in your agreement, you're leaving it to a judge to make a decision. So with all that being said, let's start talking about what is included in child support. Now, there are three broad categories of things that child support covers. It covers basically your housing expenses. It covers variable expenses, which are the expenses that follow the child. So that would be things like food and the gas for you to drive them around. And then the third category is controlled expenses. These are things like some extracurricular activities, hobbies, clothing, things like that. So let's talk about each of those categories and kind of drill down a little bit more. So housing's easy. So 38% of child support is meant to cover housing. So what that means is it's meant to cover the fact that if you have a child and they need a room, you, instead of needing a one-bedroom apartment, you now need a two-bedroom apartment. So that 38% is meant to cover the extra cost for the child. It's not meant to cover your housing expenses completely because you live there. It's meant to cover your child's part of the housing expenses, and that's mortgage or rent, property taxes, homeowners insurance, all the utilities, condo fees, anything that with regard to housing. That's what that's supposed to cover. And that's really 38% of your child support, which is just your housing expenses. So, just keep that in mind that when you're paying child support or receiving child support, a big chunk, almost 40%, it's just to put a roof over your child's head. It's really what it's about. And obviously, the more money you make, the nicer that roof is supposed to be. So that's why the number goes up. Now, when we talk about variable expenses, so we're talking about food and transportation for the most part. Um, Food is everything that they consume. So that means all the food in your house. That means going out to eat. That means school lunch. School lunch is something that, if you're getting child support, you're going to pay for. It's all of those things. Transportation. This is not to buy your child a car. A car purchased for a child when they're 16, 17, 18, that is not included in child support. What is included in child support is your car. So your costs to drive your child around. So your cost for fuel, for maintenance, for your car payment. Um, a small part of that is covered by child support because you got to drive your child around, right? So those are things that are included in child support. So what else is included? Your kid's clothing. And this is what we consider a controlled expense. So typically, the parent or primary residence who is getting child support is going to be buying the kids clothes. Obviously, if you have an arrangement where the kid's spending equal time with both parents are going to be buying clothes. And there is adjustments to child support that can be done to account for that fact. But this is all your kids' clothing. This is, clothing they wear every day. This is clothing if they have a school uniform that they need. That it's footwear. If your kids are younger, this also is diapers, dry cleaning. If they're a little bit older and maybe they have school uniforms, jewelry, anything your kids are going to be wearing is included in child support. The things that wouldn't be included are specialty uniforms. So if your kid plays a sport like lacrosse or does gymnastics or does dance, those clothes are not included in child support, and neither is the footwear. So if your kid plays football or soccer or something like that, and they need special footwear, that's typically not included in child support. And I'll get to a little bit more of that in a minute. That's a little bit more of a grayish area, but it's not really included in child support. Also included in child support are all unreimbursed healthcare expenses. So healthcare is medical, dental, vision, psychiatric, therapy, everything that's healthcare related. All of those costs up to $250 per year per child are included in child support. So basically, the intention there is that your copays for your kids, whoever's receiving child support is going to be paying for those copays. Prescription drugs, same thing, up to $250 a year. Anything over $250 a year is going to be split by the parents, and that's going to be split the way I said before, either proportionate to income, one parent's going to pay it all, or it's going to be equally divided. That's something that you and your spouse, going to be ex-spouse, or the other parent, you are going to have to negotiate. Child support does cover entertainment for your child. Now, this is where it starts to get a little bit more gray, because there are some broad categories of things, and some of them have limitations, but the limitations aren't actually in the law itself. They're much more, I call them common sense limitations. But it covers admissions to sporting and recreational events, social activities. Your kids want to go out to the movies. You're giving them money to go to the movies. Anything they need in the house, so their television set, their mobile devices, their cell phones. If they have any pets, their pets, any hobbies they have, any toys, any recreational equipment that they need, that's all included in child support. Now, a lot of times people will agree that certain expenses, like for example, sporting events. So if you, again, let's go back to gymnastics or dance. My daughter's in gymnastics. I know how expensive it is. I mean, just the monthly fees to do gymnastics can easily approach $5,000 for the year, and then you've got to buy all kinds of other stuff. That is not included in child support. Child support is not intended to cover that big of an expense. Now, where does the line get drawn between an expense that's included in child support and is not when it comes to things like extracurricular activities? It's unclear. Typically, people will agree that any expense over a certain dollar amount is going to be split by the parties. Judges tend to use much more of a common sense approach. If it's a typical expense that most kids would incur, that's de minimis. So, for example, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, going on field trips, like a rec program at a YMCA that's, not very expensive. Those things might be more apt to be included in child support, where things like dance, gymnastics, football, lacrosse, basketball, baseball, softball, um, things like that, those are almost never going to be included in child support because the expenses are just too high. You've got to pay for uniforms, you've got to pay for the fees themselves. If you're in a travel program, you got to pay for the travel. So travel soccer or something like that. So it is definitely something where this is the only area where there's a little bit of gray, but clearly any expense that most kids don't incur, because most kids aren't in lacrosse, most kids aren't in gymnastics, most kids aren't in dance, those expenses are not included in child support, and those expenses will need to be divided. Now, sort of a practice point for everybody listening is that if you are going to agree that certain expenses are going to be split, let's say you agree that anything more than $150 will be split. Just make sure that you make it clear that you have to agree that your child's going to be in this activity. What you don't want to happen is one parent just signing kids up for things and just giving the other person the bill. That happens far too often. There's language you can put into your agreement to protect yourself. So make sure you speak to your attorney about that to ensure that language is put in. Some things that are not, that's basically everything included in child support, by the way. I just went through it. It's a lot of broad categories. Their housing, their food, their clothes, most of their activities that don't cost all that much, unreimbursed healthcare expenses less than $250 per year per child, your transportation costs for you driving them around. Those are the broad categories of things included in child support. What is not included in child support? So we already said unreimbursed healthcare expenses exceeding $250 per year per child, not included. The cost to actually provide health insurance for your child, not included in child support. So what happens with that is the incremental cost of it, in other words, the difference between a parent-child and just the parent, whatever the difference is in the cost, that amount gets added to child support as an additional cost. And then also their childcare expenses. So childcare, whether they're a Montessori school or they're just in an aftercare program at a public school, or they're a YMCA program, summer camp, whatever it is that they're in, to allow the parents to actually work, that is not included in child support, and that is something that is usually split. Again, normally it's on income basis, proportionate to income, but it could be other ways. That's sort of up to the two of you. Summer camp is a big issue, obviously. Some summer camps can be very expensive. Some can be relatively inexpensive. Those are sorts of things that you want to put framework into your agreement to ensure that you and your spouse, then ex-spouse, don't have fights all the time. What kind of summer camp do you want your child in? What summer camp's okay to enroll them in without having to fight about it? Are there are there price limitations in terms of what kind of camp you want your kids in? Those are things that you discuss at the time you're making the agreement, not later on. Because again, later on, a judge is going to look at it and say, okay, does this kind of summer camp, is it appropriate for people that make this level of income? And again, that's subjective, right? Again, we already went over the fact that their car itself is not included in child support. So when your kids are ready to get a car, those are expenses that you're going to have to figure out how to divide. Now, does your kid even need a car? That's, again, subjective, right? But that's something you might want to think about, particularly if your kid's in the teenage years already. Go ahead and think about it now. Don't have fights later on. I mean, our whole philosophy here at New Jersey Divorce Solutions is you should address everything that is foreseeable in your agreement. Why set yourself up to have fights later on when things are foreseeable? I mean, it's foreseeable that your kid might be driving someday. It's foreseeable that your kids are going to be involved in extracurricular activities, even if they're, an infant at the time you're separating. And then the next thing, it's foreseeable that they're going to go to a post-secondary education of some kind. They're going to go to community college, they're going to go to university, they're going to go to vocational school. They're going to do something. That's foreseeable. Obviously, not every child does, but most do. So that's something that you can address in your agreement, and college expenses are not included in child support. Now, what are college expenses? I believe that college expenses start well back into high school, and they start with the kinds of tests that you have to take to get into college. So PSAT, SAT, AP classes, which you don't need to go into college, but AP classes, advanced placement classes, the ACT, all of these tests, and then the courses you take to prepare to take the tests. Those are not included in child support, and I believe they're part of college expenses, and that's something you should keep in mind. Then, as you get ready for your kid to go to college, most people go and they visit the colleges. Obviously, during COVID-19, things have probably changed a little bit, but usually you're going to go visit the college. There's expenses involved. Then you have college application fees. So you have all these things. And then your child's going to go to college. Are they going to college in New Jersey and living at home and driving, or are they living on campus? As you can see, these things all relate to each other. You've got a situation where if you've got a commuting kid, they probably need a car. If they're on campus, maybe they don't need a car, but then you've got to deal with transportation back and forth to home. So there's a lot of expenses there. None of that's included in child support. Not one dime of all of that is included in child support. So you need to really keep that in mind. Also not included in child support is long distance parenting time expenses. So if you and your ex-spouse, the other parent, live on opposite ends of the country and you've got to fly a plane back and forth to do parenting time, the cost of that plane is not included in child support. So, you need to make sure that that's addressed if that applies to you. But, the bottom line here is that most of your routine expenses are included in child support. No question. The ones that aren't included, we just went over. And that is going to be something that you and your spouse should address at the beginning, not the end. There's certain things that we all know kids incur. So just be sure you think about things, you're measured about it. If you retain an experienced family law attorney, they're going to know traditionally the kinds of things that are not, the kinds of things that parents need to split later on, and they'll make sure all those things are included in your agreement. But the more specific you can be, the better. So, for example, if you know your child is already involved in an activity, I'll use my daughter. She's in gymnastics. So if you already know your child's in an activity, I would make sure the agreement says that the parties already agree that she'll continue that activity. Why set yourself up for a fight in the future? Make sure your agreement is clear. But when we look at child support, as far as the court is concerned, we just went through the things that the court includes in child support. Anything that's not included, or if it's a gray area where it's a matter of it's included technically, but it's a matter of degree. If it's inexpensive, it might be included. If it's expensive, it's not included. You really should be talking to your ex-spouse about how to divide those expenses at the beginning. Because if you leave it up to a judge, you're leaving up to someone's discretion. And you're leaving up to their life experiences about what they think is appropriate for a child to be in or not be in. And that's not something that you want to find yourself in. So I hope this was helpful. And obviously, if you have any questions, give our office a call at 732-529-6937. We'd be happy to help you. I hope everybody stays safe. And I hope if your kids are homeschooling right now, or virtual learning, I guess is what we're calling it, I hope that continues to go very well. If your kids are going to school, hope they stay safe. I hope we all can stay safe and that we get rid of this COVID-19 virus soon. All right? Everyone have a great day.